I spend most of my time on the couch. When I get here around 9 p.m., that's where I fall asleep. That's where I wake up at 6 a.m. While reports spread online for months, Tony Beets' family stayed quiet. People couldn't stop wondering about the fights they saw on TV. Monica's heated fights with her dad. Kevin's quick choice to quit the family business. Mike was in charge while Tony took a step back. So much talk went around that some people said Tony was broke, sick, or quietly retiring. The Beets family finally chose to speak up. What they told you about the real bad feelings going on behind the scenes will shock you. The reports about Tony's future were not at all what they seemed to be. It was December 15, 1959, in Videns, a small Dutch town by the North Sea. There was always wind there, and things moved slowly. The smell of barns and the weight of never-ending chores were a big part of his youth. He milked cows before dawn and fixed old machines after school until he was 10 years old. There were a lot of wet fields all around him, and the work was like a test that never stopped. He kept going because that was the only life he knew. He was changed by those early years before he ever touched a gold pan. They built his backbone in mud and tractor grease, not in school or in comfort. In 1974, everything changed. Tony was 14 years old when his dad was in a terrible accident that wouldn't let him work again. Suddenly, Tony had to take care of the whole farm. He took care of the animals, the jobs, the repairs, and even told the older workers what to do. At first, telling grown guys what to do seemed weird, but someone had to keep the farm alive. He was working 16 hours a day and making choices that most adults would avoid by the time he was 16. He quickly learned that age didn't matter when it came to being a boss. It only cared about grit, which he had plenty of. He kept pulling, though. The flat fields of Friesland got too small for him when he was in his late teens. A lot of the time, the pay was so low that the young men around him couldn't even buy cars or simple homes. Watched as people worked their whole lives just to get by. He was scared by that thought. He wanted to work somewhere that gave him awards instead of just making him tired. His search for work abroad began. First it was factories, then oil work, but each choice felt like a different way to get caught in the same trap. He wanted more than just to stay alive. He wished for a chance to get ahead. Everything changed as the stories made their way across the Atlantic. Some people talked about Canada and how guys in Alberta could make over $1,000 a week. Tony thought that number was huge. He thought it was the door he had been waiting for. In 1980, he and Minnie saved up about $1,200 and got on a plane, but they spoke almost no English and had no idea what was waiting for them. When they got to Abbotsford, Tony got a job milking cows for $4 an hour. He felt bad because he had made more money doing the same work in Widens. He didn't give up looking even then. After working in building, he paid close attention when miners talked about the Yukon. As he drove to Dawson City in March 1981 in search of work, he found that the season had not yet started. He went back to British Columbia and worked in the oil fields for $15 an hour. When the ground stopped being frozen, he went back to the Yukon. He finally got the call he had been waiting for in 1984. A mining company asked him to come back. When he got to the Klondike, he still had the anger and drive of a farm kid who had spent his whole life pushing the limits. He started out small by running machines for other people. This is how he learned how claims work and how to tell who really made money and who was just pretending to. In 10 years, he had his own crew. He was in charge of one of the hardest mining projects in the area by the 2000s. His name would become known all over the world through the Discovery Channel. But he started to climb a long time before the cameras showed up. Long nights, frozen ground, and learning to be tough on a Dutch farm were the start. Tony and Minnie only had $300 between them when they first came to Canada in 1980. English took a while to learn. I mostly learned it on building sites and by watching soap operas with Minnie. Every year, the Yukon dream got stronger because every job they had felt like it was short-term. Tony thought that having something was more important than renting his time to other people. He didn't give up on that chance. He bought a plane ticket to Whitehorse in early 1981, but as he got there, he saw that the mining season was still months away. After going back to Alberta to work a few more oil jobs, he came back when the ice melted. Tamaya Incorporated hired people to do mining work in Dawson City. He pushed dozers and loaders for 16 hours at a time while the wind cut through his clothes. He had to do hard work, but the pay and the chance to grow kept him going. He saw the best workers make more money in a season than he had seen in the Netherlands years before. He slowly learned everything about the business. Others thought it was impossible for him to fix tools, and he worked hours that most men tried to avoid. People on the group saw how hard he worked. Some people liked him. Some didn't like him. A lot of people were afraid of him. But everyone knew that he got things done. He learned two things during these years. First, the mine owner is the only one who really gets rich. Second, money only stays with people who keep costs down and tools running. He saw how often careless workers failed. Tony told himself that he would never be careless. He learned how to read the ground and saved all the money he could. He bought a used bulldozer and made his first claim around the middle of the 1980s. At first, it wasn't very rich ground, but there were small amounts of gold. Helped him get rid of debt and get better gear. He was building something real one step at a time, even though it was slow. He had built Tamarack Mine by 1990. At that moment, he went from being a hired hand to a real boss. From then on, he focused on getting more and growing. Over the next few years, he slowly turned the small leases he had around Paradise Hill and Indian River into one big business. In the early 1990s, he owned some of Yukon's best land for farming. In the future, his children would help run this trust, which would grow into one of the biggest businesses in the area. People in the area knew his name long before the gold rush cameras showed up. People called him a famous gold producer because he made so much gold every year. Some miners were lucky to get a few hundred ounces, but Tony got over 5,000 ounces in a single season. His workers worked long hours, his machines never stopped, and his business rarely stopped. His enemies looked up to him because he knew the land so well. Because he could make more than anyone else, they were afraid of him. Tony had a simple plan. He was interested in numbers and efficiency. He used more than one wash plant at the same time, so if one broke down, the others would keep going. During the season of 2024 to 2025, he ran 3 plants at the same time and made over $700,000 in gold in just a few days. He treated the short Yukon season like a race, where each hour was important. In 2024, when his teams made about 3,600 ounces of gold, this was a great example. In just a few months, it became worth more than $4 million. It wasn't luck. They got it by running heavy machinery around the clock and never slowing down unless they had to. He set up a business that could grow quickly and stay the same. Millions of people saw Tony on Gold Rush, but he already ran a mining business before that. 12 excavators, 8 bulldozers for wash plants, and the Viking dredge, which was worth more than $5 million, were in his fleet. He was looked up to by new miners because his successes were so well known. They stayed away from him though because he was the type of boss who expected everything to go quickly. Tony Beets did not just become famous in Yukon after growing up on a farm in the Netherlands. Each number on his way from $300 in 1980 to millions of dollars in gold decades later chose a road based on hard work, discipline, and the belief that hard work should pay off. When Tony Beets joined Gold Rush in Season 2, the whole mood of the show changed as soon as he spoke. For more than 40 years, he lived in the Yukon, and it showed in everything he did, said, and looked at. People watched as younger workers like Parker Schnabel and Todd Hoffman tried to figure out how to do simple things. Then Tony walked in, carrying the weight of decades. Second, money only stays with people who keep costs down and tools running. He saw how often careless workers failed. Tony told himself that he would never be careless. He learned how to read the ground and saved all the money he could. He bought a used bulldozer and made his first claim around the middle of the 1980s. At first, it wasn't very rich ground, but there were small amounts of gold. Helped him get rid of debt and get better gear. He was building something real one step at a time, even though it was slow. He had built Tamarack Mine by 1990. At that moment, he went from being a hired hand to a real boss. From then on, he focused on getting more and growing. Over the next few years, he slowly turned the small leases he had around Paradise Hill and Indian River into one big business. In the early 1990s, he owned some of Yukon's best land for farming. In the future, his children would help run this trust, which would grow into one of the biggest businesses in the area. People in the area knew his name long before the gold rush cameras showed up. People called him a famous gold producer because he made so much gold every year. Some miners were lucky to get a few hundred ounces, but Tony got over 5,000 ounces in a single season. His workers worked long hours, his machines never stopped, and his business rarely stopped. His enemies looked up to him because he knew the land so well. Because he could make more than anyone else, they were afraid of him. Tony had a simple plan. He was interested in numbers and efficiency. He used more than one wash plant at the same time, so if one broke down, the others would keep going. During the season of 2024 to 2025, he ran 3 plants at the same time and made over $700,000 in gold in just a few days. He treated the short Yukon season like a race, where each hour was important. In 2024, when his teams made about 3,600 ounces of gold, this was a great example. In just a few months, it became worth more than $4 million. It wasn't luck. They got it by running heavy machinery around the clock and never slowing down unless they had to. He set up a business that could grow quickly and stay the same. Millions of people saw Tony on Gold Rush, but he already ran a mining business before that. 12 excavators, 8 bulldozers for wash plants, and the Viking dredge, which was worth more than $5 million, were in his fleet. He was looked up to by new miners because his successes were so well known. They stayed away from him though because he was the type of boss who expected everything to go quickly. Tony Beets did not just become famous in Yukon after growing up on a farm in the Netherlands. Each number on his way from $300 in 1980 to millions of dollars in gold decades later chose a road based on hard work, discipline, and the belief that hard work should pay off. When Tony Beets joined Gold Rush in Season 2, the whole mood of the show changed as soon as he spoke. For more than 40 years, he lived in the Yukon, and it showed in everything he did, said, and looked at. People watched as younger workers like Parker Schnabel and Todd Hoffman tried to figure out how to do simple things. Then Tony walked in, carrying the weight of decades. The show felt like a battle of generations all of a sudden. Parker was hungry and had a business-minded mind. But Tony brought something more sharp, something older, something made from fuel, ice, and long winters. The people who made it saw it right away. Because they were close to him, they made him the king of the Klondike. These traits made Gold Rush become the most popular show on Discovery by 2014, as the seasons went on. People watched every week to see what Tony would yell about next. He wasn't pretending to yell. People who worked with him before the cameras came out already knew what kind of person he was. Tony swore because he meant to. He yelled because that's what the job called for. When he was in the Yukon, time was money that was running out with every bucket of dirt. A lot of people admired him for that. Some people thought he was being too tough. But everyone agreed on one thing. Tony meant what he said. He was in charge of his team like he had done it many times before and learned from it. The show didn't even have to write him. They just set up the cameras and watched him act. Later, the editors made the stress worse, but the main behavior didn't change. People watched because they thought he was real. Some people said the same thing. The man you saw on TV was the same one people have seen in the field for decades. All of this attention brought Tony something he didn't expect. Mining is hard to predict, but TV isn't. Tony got a second way to make money when he became important to Gold Rush. Tony made $15,000 to $25,000 per episode while other mines barely made it while they waited for gold prices to go up. That was enough to make them $300,000 to $400,000 a year just from being on TV. During some seasons, Tony kept getting the gold output dip from his TV checks, which let him. A huge benefit. Could take risks that other people wouldn't. He could set big goals, bet big, and plan for the long run. It became even harder to compete with the king of the Klondike now that he had extra money. The show showed another side of Tony over time. His family became an important part of his power. With her help, Minnie ran the business and took care of the money. One job at a time, they taught their kids how to work. Monica took care of the details. Kevin was in charge of things. Mike learned how to use the big tools. People saw a small family business grow into a huge one right in front of them. The makers also played on that by showing how the Beets family turned long days into a legacy. This sense of togetherness made the mining feel more personal, rooted, and full than just adding up the gold. But fame also cast dark shadows. Every year, stories started going around online. Some people said Tony was leaving. Some people said he was poor. Some people said he was sick. By the end of 2024, hashtags and titles on social media were full of dramatic images and posts that hinted at his downfall. The family had to deal with these stories over and over, putting an end to lies that spread like gold dust through the air. Millions of people watched the show, and then they talked about Tony's life as if they knew him directly. People thought he was both a myth and a child because of the mix of facts and hearsay. With the Viking dredge, he took the biggest risk of his life. People thought Tony had lost it when he bought the industrial digger from 1939 that was 75 years old. It was about 350 tons heavy and hadn't been used since the 1980s. It stayed at Clear Creek Lane for a long time until Tony paid $1 million to make it his. Some miners didn't believe him when he said that it had the power to pull gold out of the ground. He thought about times when the dredge could bring in $7.5 million in gold. The ground was good, and the numbers made him want to go there. Most wash plants deal with a few hundred tons of dirt every day, but the Viking could move up to 2,000 gallons of water through its system every minute. That size was important. Tony thought it could bring down the cost of digging from about $1,000 an ounce to about $1,000. Between $300 and $400 an ounce. Everything would be different if he could get it to run. It was awful to get it to run. The digger had to be taken apart one piece at a time. Tony and his crew dragged the big steel pieces more than 100 miles to Eureka Creek, where they worked for months to weld, fix, align, and put back together again. Several cranes and more than 10 Miller welders worked nonstop on the project. At this point, no gold was being made, but costs kept going up. Moving and rebuilding the whole house cost Tony a lot of money and put his finances on the edge. He kept going anyway. Everyone was shocked when he got the dredge running in 2015. They thought it would break down before it even hit dirt again. Gold Rush thought that all of this made for a great story. Every failure and every glimmer of hope was caught on film. Every week, fans disagreed on whether Tony was smart or crazy. When his family talked about the risk behind closed doors, it made the episodes even worse. The dredge was more than just a machine, so people watched it. Tony showed that he was smarter than most people today. Even though the dredge never lived up to its full promise, the risk made him famous. He proved that old engineering and resolve could still upend a whole sphere of work. But Tony had a very exciting moment that had nothing to do with leaving. He let his team film a stunt in October 2014 that people would look at for years. A builder named Mark Favrin put gasoline in a dredge pond and lit it on fire. While Tony yelled his line about hell or high water, the fires rose into the dark Yukon sky. It aired in February 2015 during the show's Hundreds of Ounces episode. The scene looked amazing on TV, but people didn't like it, and Yukon officials paid attention. The fire that was fun for a short time led to an investigation for breaking the law about the environment. The charges were very bad. Tony and his business, Tamarack Incorporated, were charged with letting trash into a water management area without telling anyone about it. They also faced charges for not following the rules for their water license. Tony was given a $6,000 fine, and Tamarack was given a $25,000 fine. It cost $31,000 to hit. John Chisholm, the judge, said Tony could have stopped the stunt but didn't. The prosecution wanted fines of up to $50,000, but the court chose a level that they thought sent a strong enough message. The court played the video of Tony standing in front of the flames over and over again during the hearing. The judge said that Tony took part in the show for the cameras and never tried to stop it. It got really hard to tell the difference between TV and mining, and Tony paid for it. News crews waited outside the building afterward, but Tony didn't say anything. He left without saying sorry or giving a reason. People saw him as someone who doesn't give in to rules or public pressure because he didn't say anything. Also, it made everyone remember that drama from reality TV can spread to real life and have real effects. At the start of season 15, Tony Beets was in a hurry. He thought for a moment that nothing in the Yukon could slow him down. He got 774 ounces of gold from his Indian River claim in just the first 2 weeks. He set a new record for the fastest start in his 40-year mining career. It was worth close to $1.9 million. He put 2 wash plants to work before they were supposed to, and it paid off. Other crews had to deal with broken tools and slow starts, but Tony's camp moved like it had been ready all winter to go. Every pot, every dish, and every long night at Indian River made it feel like this season could be one of the most important in history. After that, everything turned around. In November 2025, a single beaver stopped a culvert, and the early bird cut washed out. At the time, it was the only place he had to make things. The backup in the culvert filled the whole cut, making the ground into a small lake. The investigation ended. It got quiet at the wash plant. Instead of dirt, the crews stood next to fast-moving water. There was a pause for days after Tony told everyone to turn everything off and clear the blockage. Online fans were not sure if this was the start of a bad run or something bigger. It was hard to time things. People thought his kingdom was falling apart when he went quiet for a while after such a strong start. Rumors spread quickly on social media sites that loved to make every setback sound worse. Soon, videos went around of Tony saying he might take a step back or slow down. Little things he said turned into stories about him saying goodbye. It caught on in social media. Fans looked for clues in every scene and interview that he was getting ready to quit. People were even more upset when Kevin chose to live on his own, because they thought that when a son left, it meant the father was giving up. Clickbait titles made simple events seem like serious warnings. And by the end of the week, everyone was sure Tony was ready to leave. Always. Tony calmed down and talked to TV Insider to clear the air. He said he wasn't going to retire and wasn't going to stop digging. He said that every year he works 7 months and then takes 5 months off to enjoy life. He also said that's what he's been doing for 40 years. His words calmed down a lot of worried fans. He said that as he ages, he will let his job change, but he can still think, plan, and run an operation. He said he wasn't leaving, just getting used to things. Being honest brought the talk back to the real world. But the clickbait cloud had already turned into a storm. Record hauls, quick shutdowns, and half quotes gave dramatic thumbnails and over-the-top titles a lot of material to work with. A lot of posts said things like disaster, collapse, or final farewells. But the truth stayed simple. Tony went through a rough patch, but he made changes and kept going. He kept working in the field, even though his main job was changing to supervising. Things did not go badly in the real story. It was about a tough boss who has spent decades showing that he can keep going even when things go wrong. Someone fans don't see very often was behind all that noise. A person who runs the Beets business when no one is looking. The money, forms, and contracts are all taken care of by many Beets. Making sure everything is accounted for before a single bucket of pay dirt moves, she keeps track of the money and the tools. For more than 10 years, she has kept Tony's big ideas in check by keeping an eye on the long run. Tony knows that he can never say no to her. She is the calm center of the business. Nobody else changes what she does, even though the mining world is always changing. The Beets kids have also become well-known adults. Mike is in charge at Paradise Hill. He has been able to lead large groups of people and heavy machinery since he was 13. He is the one who can move 40-ton cranes and jump right into any machine. Monica is in charge of the money, the employees, the plans, and even her own line of products. When it's necessary, she fights against rules and keeps the business running smoothly from the inside. They play important roles. They are very important to the Beets business and its growth. Then Kevin made the choice to leave. He tried to get his own claim. He wanted to be free. Tony let him do it and rented him land, but he only got 10% of Kevin's future goals. Their relationship became more equal after that. Kevin had his own problems, like problems with groundwater and broken equipment, and he and Tony got into a fight over support and deals. But Tony still let him borrow planes and told him that kids have to learn to fly on their own one day. Kevin showed that he was strong enough to handle a claim. The family went through a big change, and it showed how the next generation might run things. As everything went on, fans could feel the anxiety at times. Episodes showed that Tony and Monica had small arguments. They got more attention on social media, which led to stories about broken vows or deeper conflicts. People on Reddit talked about Tony's ways of managing and asked if he always kept his promises to his kids. A family business has disagreements like that all the time, but the cameras made it look worse. Fans closely followed the stories that had those emotional moments, especially when kids took on new parts or left old ones. The drama made the show seem more real and close to home. Tony moved forward with a clear plan for who would take over when he retired. He's told his kids over and over that he wants them to be more responsible. Now he talks about left behind things and getting them ready to keep the family name strong in the Yukon. He knows how hard the work is. He knows that he can't keep carrying all of these loads forever. So he shows them the way, helps them learn, and lets them grow. It's not always easy to make the change. The goal stays the same, though. Wishes that the kingdom will last after him. In 2025, he was worth between $15 million and $20 million. He didn't become rich quickly. It happened over many years of high returns, smart investments, rental income, and steady TV exposure. His team took out 3,600 ounces of gold worth $4.39 million just in 2018. There was even more in years like 2021, with a $5.6 million gain during a shorter season. The amounts look very big. The costs are just as high, though. Prices for fuel, parts, wages, tools, and the weather can quickly wipe out earnings. Gold digging pays for hard work but not for mistakes. Tony has lived with that risk for many years. The money he makes from TV helps him get through the tough times. He is said to make between $25,000 and $50,000 per show. Thanks to the more than 160 episodes that have been shot, that money is really helpful. Costs for looks and name recognition make it worse. Things move slowly on the ground or break. Everything keeps going thanks to the TV money. It keeps people from losing their jobs and the business from shutting down when things go badly. It's a safety net that not many workers have. The risk never goes away, though. The price of gold changes. Things break down. It's already winter. Even though Beets is worth a lot of money, a few bad seasons could really put a strain on their business. Some online stories make up reports about hidden wealth or secret losses, but most of those stories are made up from bits and pieces put together to get clicks. The truth stays more stable. Tony worked hard for a long time and made a lot of money. He came very close to disasters. He kept going. His success isn't due to quick miracles, but to hard work over time. He talked about his plans again in October 2025. He said he wasn't quitting, but he was taking a break from working in the front lines. He said he was ready to enjoy life after 40 years of digging. He said he wasn't done, though. His kids had hit a point where they could handle real responsibility, so he gave them more freedom. He had to take care of personal issues. He then turned his attention to planning while giving the kids more day-to-day work. It wasn't about getting sick or falling apart. It was about leaving a mark in time. Kevin's move showed that change the most clearly. Mike's guidance made Paradise Hill stronger. Monica was in charge of the gold room and the arrangements. They are making plans for the next phase of the family business together. Tony can see it and agrees with it. He says it's great. As he watches, he wants them to grow and the process to change, but he doesn't want to be physically tired all the time. Tony Beets looked different by the end of 2025. He was still there. He was still strong, but he stood a little farther back so that his kids could carry more weight. It wasn't a breakup or a goodbye. This was the start of a story he had been working up to for years. Through all of these changes, rumors, and flutters of speculation, the Beets company kept moving forward. This was made possible by a man who never stopped planning for the future and by a family learning how to pass on the business to the next generation.